In a small cafe hidden in the heart of Manhattan, Emma Carter moved quietly between tables. The cafe was not fancy, but it had its own charm. Warm yellow lights hung from the ceiling, and old wooden chairs were paired with round tables that wobbled slightly when touched. A faint smell of coffee beans and fresh pastries filled the air, making the place feel cozy even though it wasn't crowded. It was late evening, and most of the customers had already left. Only 2 or 3 people remained, sipping their drinks while chatting softly or reading books. Emma worked as a waitress here. She was in her late 20s, with soft brown hair that fell just below her shoulders. Her eyes were warm but carried a hint of sadness, like she had seen more than her share of hard times. She wore a simple black apron over her clothes and held a tray in one hand as she cleared empty cups and plates from the tables. Though she didn't say much, there was something calming about her presence. People often felt comfortable around her without knowing why. Near the corner of the room stood an old piano. It was covered in dust, untouched for years. Nobody seemed to notice it anymore. Once upon a time, it might have been played by musicians entertaining guests, but now it looked forgotten, almost like a piece of furniture no one wanted to move. Emma glanced at it every so often as she worked. To her, it wasn't just an object, gathering dust. It was a reminder of something she loved deeply but kept buried inside herself. When Emma was younger, she used to play the piano. She'd learned on an old keyboard her grandmother gave her, teaching herself melodies by ear. Music became her escape during difficult days. When life felt heavy, she would sit down and let her fingers glide over the keys, creating sounds that made her feel lighter. But as she grew older, reality took over. Bills needed paying, responsibilities piled up, and playing music became less of a priority. Eventually, she stopped altogether. Now, all those years later, she worked long hours at the cafe trying to make ends meet. That night, however, something changed. As Emma finished cleaning up after the last customer left, she paused near the piano. The cafe was completely silent except for the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Without thinking too much about it, she set her tray aside and sat down on the bench in front of the piano. Her hands hovered above the keys for a moment before pressing down gently. A soft note rang out into the empty room. At first, she played hesitantly, testing the instrument to see if it still worked. The sound was rich and clear, surprising her. Encouraged, she began playing a melody she remembered from childhood, a slow, melancholic tune that spoke of longing and hope. The notes flowed effortlessly, as if they had been waiting patiently inside her all these years to be released. As she played, memories flooded back. Laughter shared with her grandmother. Lonely nights spent practicing alone in her tiny bedroom. Dreams of performing on stage someday. She lost track of time as the music filled the cafe. Each note seemed to carry a piece of her soul, weaving together fragments of her past and present. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to fully immerse in the joy of creating something beautiful. Outside, the city buzzed with activity. Cars honked, footsteps echoed against pavement, but inside the cafe, everything else faded away. There was only Emma and the piano, connected by the language of music. Unbeknownst to her, someone passing by stopped outside the window. John Matthews, a tall man in his 40s dressed in a tailored suit, had been walking home after a long day at work. He paused when he heard the faint strains of music drifting through the glass. Curious, he peered inside and saw Emma sitting at the piano, her face illuminated by the warm glow of the cafe lights. Something about the scene caught his attention, not just the music, which was undeniably captivating, but also the way Emma seemed completely absorbed in what she was doing. There was a rawness to her performance, a vulnerability that pulled him in. John pushed open the door and stepped inside. The bell above it jingled softly, breaking the spell. Emma stopped playing, abruptly, startled by the sudden intrusion. She turned to see who had entered, her cheeks flushing red with embarrassment. "I'm sorry," she stammered quickly. "We're closed." John raised a hand to reassure her. "Please don't stop on my account," he said with a kind smile. That was incredible. I couldn't help but listen. Emma shifted uncomfortably on the bench. It's nothing special, she murmured, looking down at her hands. Just something I do when no one's around. Well, maybe you should consider doing it when people are around, John replied lightly. He walked closer, extending his hand. I'm John, by the way. Emma, she said, shaking his hand briefly. Up close, she noticed how sharp his features were, framed by neatly combed dark hair streaked with gray. His suit suggested wealth, but his demeanor was friendly and approachable. You have real talent, John continued. Have you ever thought about performing professionally? Emma laughed nervously, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Me? No, I don't think so. I mean, I just play for fun. It's not like I've had any formal training or anything. That doesn't matter, John insisted. Some of the best musicians I know are self-taught. You have something special, something authentic. People respond to that. Emma shook her head, dismissing the idea. Thanks, but I think you're giving me too much credit. This is just a hobby. John studied her for a moment, sensing her reluctance. Fair enough, he said finally. But if you ever change your mind or even want to try, I'd love to hear you play again. Here. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. Call me anytime. Emma took the card hesitantly, glancing at it before slipping it into her apron pocket. Thank you, she said quietly. I'll think about it. As John left the cafe, Emma sat back down at the piano, staring at the keys. Part of her dismissed the encounter as nothing more than a polite compliment from a stranger. But another part, the part that still dreamed quietly, tucked away beneath layers of practicality, wondered what might happen if she dared to take a chance. For now, though, she simply closed the lid of the piano and returned to her routine, unsure of what the future held. Over the next few days, Emma couldn't stop thinking about her conversation with John. His words lingered in her mind like a melody she couldn't shake off. She replayed their brief meeting again and again, how he had stopped to listen, how he complimented her playing, and most of all, how sincere he seemed when he encouraged her to share her music with others. It wasn't just flattery. There was something genuine in his tone, something that made her wonder if maybe, just maybe, he believed in her more than she believed in herself. Still, doubt crept in whenever she allowed herself to entertain the idea of performing publicly. Who was she to think she could stand on a stage in front of an audience? She wasn't trained like those musicians who spent years honing their craft at prestigious schools. She didn't have expensive instruments or connections in the music world. All she had was a dusty old piano in a quiet cafe and memories of songs she'd taught herself as a child. What did she know about captivating people with her music? But despite her doubts, curiosity got the better of her. One evening after work, while sitting alone in her small apartment, Emma pulled out the business card John had given her. She turned it over in her hands, studying the simple black text printed neatly on thick white paper. John Matthews, arts consultant. Below his name was a phone number and email address. For a moment she considered tossing it into a drawer and forgetting about it altogether. But instead, she placed it carefully on her kitchen counter, where she would see it every morning. The following week passed slowly. Emma went about her usual routine, serving coffee, wiping tables, chatting politely with customers. But her thoughts kept drifting back to the idea of playing for an audience. Late at night, when the cafe was empty and everyone else had gone, home she found herself drawn to the piano once more. This time she played with purpose, experimenting with new melodies and practicing pieces she hadn't touched in years. Each note felt like a step toward something unknown but exciting. Then, one rainy afternoon, John walked into the cafe again. He wasn't alone this time. With him were two other people, a woman with silver-streaked hair wearing a stylish coat, and a man with glasses carrying a leather notebook. They looked polished and sophisticated, clearly not regular patrons of the modest establishment. Emma recognized John immediately and felt her stomach tighten with nerves. Emma, John greeted her warmly, stepping forward. I hope you don't mind us dropping by unannounced. Not at all, Emma replied, forcing a smile. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Tea? That would be lovely, thank you, said the woman, giving her a friendly nod. My name is Margaret Lane, and this is Richard Dawson. Emma nodded politely, though she wasn't sure what to make of their presence. As she prepared their drinks behind the counter, John explained why they were there. "We're hosting a private event soon, a gala for some friends and colleagues, and we'd love for you to perform," he said casually, as though asking her to join them for dinner. Emma nearly dropped the mug she was holding. "What?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's true," Margaret chimed in. "John told us about your incredible talent, and we simply must hear you play ourselves. Please, won't you consider it?" Emma shook her head instinctively. "I'm sorry, but I'm not ready for something like that." Richard leaned forward slightly, his expression thoughtful. "You might surprise yourself," he said gently. "Sometimes the best performances come from moments of uncertainty. Trust me, I've seen it happen." Emma glanced at each of them in turn, feeling overwhelmed. These were successful, accomplished individuals who moved in circles far beyond anything she could imagine. How could they possibly think she belonged among them? "I appreciate the offer," she began hesitantly, "but I'm just a waitress. I don't have the experience or the training you're probably looking for." John smiled reassuringly. "That doesn't matter to us. What matters is authenticity. Your music speaks for itself. We're not asking you to be perfect. We're asking you to share your gift." Emma bit her lip, torn between fear and curiosity. On one hand, the thought of standing in front of wealthy strangers terrified her. On the other hand, a small part of her, the same part that dreamed quietly late at night, wanted to say yes, to take a chance, to see where it might lead. Margaret must have sensed her hesitation because she added softly, "There's no pressure, dear. Just think about it. If you decide to do it, we'll support you every step of the way." With that, the trio thanked her for the coffee and left as suddenly as they'd arrived. Emma watched them go, still clutching the tray in her hands. Her heart raced as she tried to process what had just happened. A private gala, wealthy guests, performances by someone like her. It sounded like something out of a movie, not real life. Over the next few days, Emma wrestled with her decision. She talked to her best friend Lisa during their rare moments of free time. Lisa listened patiently as Emma poured out her fears and doubts. "You should do it," Lisa said firmly when Emma finished. "When's the last time anyone gave you an opportunity like this? You can't let it slip away." "But what if I mess up?" Emma countered. "What if they hate it?" Lisa rolled her eyes good-naturedly. "You won't mess up, and even if you do, so what? At least you'll have tried. That's more than most people can say." Her words stuck with Emma. Slowly, the idea of saying yes began to feel less impossible. Maybe she didn't need to be perfect. Maybe all she needed to do was trust herself, and the music that had always been a part of her. Finally, after much deliberation, Emma decided to take the leap. She called John the following evening, her hands trembling as she dialed the number. When he answered, she took a deep breath and said, "I'll do it." John's response was immediate and enthusiastic. "That's wonderful news, Emma. You won't regret this. We'll help you prepare, and everything will fall into place." True to his word, John arranged for Emma to meet with Richard, who turned out to be a renowned pianist and teacher. Over the next several weeks, Richard worked closely with her, helping her refine her technique and build confidence. He praised her natural ability and encouraged her to embrace her unique style rather than trying to imitate others. Meanwhile, Emma continued practicing tirelessly at the cafe. She chose a mix of classical pieces and original compositions, each one carefully selected to tell a story. Some were joyful, others melancholic, but all reflected different parts of her journey. Playing became a form of self-expression, a way to communicate emotions she struggled to put into words. As the date of the gala approached, excitement mingled with anxiety. Emma knew she was stepping into unfamiliar territory, but she also felt a growing sense of determination. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to dream, not wildly or extravagantly, but with quiet hope. Whatever happened at the gala, she realized, wouldn't define her. What mattered was that she was willing to try. And so, on a crisp, autumn morning, Emma woke up knowing that tonight would change everything. Or perhaps nothing at all. Either way, she was ready to face it head-on. The day of the gala arrived, and Emma woke up before sunrise, her mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment, practicing late into the night, fine-tuning her pieces and rehearsing under Richard's watchful eye. Yet no amount of preparation could calm the butterflies fluttering in her stomach. Today was different. Tonight, she wouldn't be playing for an empty cafe or a handful of friends. She would be performing for some of the most influential people in New York City. As she got ready, Emma took extra care with every detail. She wore a simple yet elegant navy blue dress that Lisa had helped her pick out, along with a pair of pearl earrings borrowed from her mother. Standing in front of the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The woman staring back at her looked poised and confident, but inside, Emma still felt like the same shy waitress who played piano only when no one was watching. When she arrived at the venue, a sprawling estate on the outskirts of Manhattan, her nerves kicked into overdrive. The house was breathtaking, with towering white columns and manicured gardens stretching as far as the eye could see. Inside, chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting warm light across the grand ballroom where guests mingled beneath glittering decorations. Waitstaff moved gracefully between tables, carrying trays of champagne flutes and hors d'oeuvres. It was a world entirely foreign to Emma, and for a moment she wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake coming here. John greeted her warmly at the entrance, his reassuring smile helping to ease her tension. "You look fantastic," he said, taking her coat. "Are you ready?" Emma forced a small laugh. "Not really, but I guess we'll find out." He led her backstage where Margaret and Richard were waiting. They both offered words of encouragement, reminding her to focus on the music rather than the audience. "Just play like you always do," Richard advised. "Let your heart guide you." Margaret handed her a glass of water. "Remember, everyone here is rooting for you. You've already won by having the courage to show up." Their kindness meant more to Emma than they realized. For so long she had doubted whether she deserved to take up space in rooms like this one. But now, surrounded by people who believed in her, she began to feel a flicker of confidence. Backstage, Emma waited nervously. As the event unfolded, guests filed into the ballroom, chatting animatedly and admiring the opulent surroundings. Many of them were dressed in designer gowns and tailored suits, exuding wealth and sophistication. Emma peeked through the curtain, feeling completely out of place. What could someone like her possibly offer to people like them? Finally, it was time. John stepped onto the stage to introduce her, his voice smooth and commanding as he addressed the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here tonight. Before we continue our evening, I have the privilege of introducing someone very special. Her name is Emma Carter, and though she may not be a household name yet, I assure you, her talent speaks for itself. Please welcome her warmly." A polite round of applause filled the room as Emma walked onto the stage. The spotlight hit her, momentarily blinding her as she approached the gleaming grand piano. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the bench and positioned her fingers above the keys. For a brief second, panic threatened to overwhelm her. What if she froze? What if she forgot how to play? But then she closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and let the first note ring out into the silence. It was a soft, delicate sound, almost hesitant. But soon, it grew stronger, weaving its way through the air like a thread pulling the audience closer. Emma began with a classical piece, something familiar yet infused with her own interpretation. Each note flowed effortlessly, carrying emotion that resonated deeply with those listening. Heads turned toward the stage, conversations faded, and even the clinking of glasses ceased as everyone focused on the music. As she transitioned into her second piece, an original composition inspired by her childhood, the atmosphere shifted. The melody was bittersweet, evoking memories of laughter shared with her grandmother and quiet nights spent practicing alone. Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as she played, but she didn't stop. She poured everything she had into the performance, letting the music tell her story without needing words. By the time she reached her final piece, the room was utterly spellbound. This last song was joyful, full of energy and hope, leaving listeners with a sense of renewal. When the final chord echoed through the ballroom, there was a moment of complete stillness, followed by thunderous applause. Emma sat frozen for a moment, unsure of what to do next. Then, realizing the reaction wasn't just polite clapping but genuine appreciation, she stood slowly and bowed. The audience erupted again, many rising to their feet in a standing ovation. Some wiped away tears. Others exchanged awestruck glances. No one had expected such raw beauty from the unassuming young woman introduced moments earlier. Backstage afterward, Emma struggled to process what had just happened. People swarmed around her, congratulating her and asking questions about her. Background. Reporters jotted down notes, eager to capture her story. Through it all, Emma remained humble, deflecting praise and thanking everyone who had supported her. One guest, a philanthropist named Susan Miller, approached her with a proposition. "I run a foundation that supports emerging artists," she explained. "We'd love to help fund your education at a conservatory. Your talent deserves to be nurtured." Another attendee, a record producer, offered to record an album of her compositions. Offers poured in from every direction: concert invitations, mentorship opportunities, even film directors wanting to feature her work. Emma listened in disbelief, overwhelmed by the sudden flood of possibilities. Later that night, as the gala wound down and guests began to leave, Emma found herself sitting alone at the piano once more. The room was quieter now, the buzz of excitement replaced by a peaceful calm. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, marveling at how much had changed in just a few hours. John joined her, leaning against the edge of the stage. "How are you holding up?" he asked gently. "I don't know," Emma admitted, laughing softly. "It feels surreal, like none of this can actually be happening." "It is happening," John replied. "And it's only the beginning. You've opened doors tonight that will change your life forever." Emma nodded, looking out at the empty ballroom. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe him. Though fear and doubt still lingered in the corners of her mind, they no longer overshadowed her dreams. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she wouldn't face them alone. And for now, that was enough. In the weeks following the gala, Emma's life began to change in ways she never imagined. The performance that had once seemed like a distant dream now felt real, its impact rippling through every part of her existence. Offers continued to pour, in emails from music producers, invitations to prestigious events, and even requests for interviews with newspapers and magazines. At first, Emma struggled to keep up. She was used to living quietly, moving through her days without much attention. Now people wanted to know everything about her: where she came from, how she learned to play, what inspired her music. Margaret Lane, the philanthropist who had attended the gala, became one of Emma's strongest supporters. True to her word, she helped arrange funding for Emma to attend a renowned conservatory in New York City. It wasn't easy for Emma to step into such an unfamiliar environment. Most of her classmates were younger than her and had spent years training under professional instructors. They spoke confidently about composers and techniques Emma had only heard of in passing. But instead of feeling intimidated, Emma reminded herself why she was there: to grow, to learn, and to become better at something she loved. Richard Dawson, the pianist who had mentored her before the gala, agreed to continue working with her privately. He pushed her to explore new styles and challenge herself creatively. "You have a unique voice," he told her during one of their sessions. "Don't lose it by trying to fit someone else's mold." Emma took his advice to heart. While studying classical pieces, she also worked on composing original songs. These compositions drew inspiration from her own experiences, the quiet moments of joy and sadness that shaped her life. Richard encouraged her to share them with others, saying they were too powerful to keep hidden. Despite her growing confidence, there were still moments when doubt crept in. One afternoon, after a particularly tough practice session, Emma found herself sitting alone in a small park near the conservatory. Leaves crunched beneath her feet as autumn colors painted the trees around her. She stared at the ground, replaying mistakes she'd made earlier that day. A voice interrupted her thoughts. You look like you're carrying the weight of the world, said Lisa, her best friend, plopping down beside her with 2 steaming cups of coffee. Here, I brought reinforcements. Emma smiled gratefully, accepting the cup. Thanks, I needed this. Lisa studied her for a moment. What's going on? You seem off. Emma sighed, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. I don't know if I belong here, Liz. Everyone else is so talented. I feel like I'm pretending to be something I'm not. Lisa rolled her eyes, good-naturedly. Stop selling yourself short. You've worked harder than anyone I know to get here. And besides, you didn't wow those people at the gala because you're faking it. You did it because you're amazing. Her words struck a chord. Emma realized she had been focusing too much on comparing herself to others instead of celebrating how far she'd come. Slowly, she started embracing her journey rather than worrying about where it might lead. Meanwhile, John Matthews remained a steady presence in Emma's life. Though he didn't interfere directly, he checked in regularly to see how she was adjusting. He introduced her to influential figures in the arts community, helping her build connections that would benefit her career. More importantly, he reminded her to stay grounded. Success can change people, he warned gently, but it doesn't have to change you. Emma appreciated his guidance. In many ways, John had become both a mentor and a friend, someone who believed in her when she struggled to believe in herself. His support gave her the courage to take risks she wouldn't have considered before. One evening, Emma received an invitation to perform at a charity concert hosted by Susan Miller, the philanthropist who had offered to fund her education. The event would take place in a historic theater downtown, and the audience would include some of the city's most prominent figures. For Emma, it was another opportunity to prove herself, but this time she approached it differently. Instead of letting fear consume her, she focused on the excitement of sharing her music with others. On the night of the concert, Emma stood backstage, breathing deeply as she prepared to go on. Unlike her first performance at the gala, she felt more confident this time. Her months of study and practice had paid off, and she trusted herself to deliver. When the announcer called her name, she walked onto the stage with a calm smile, bowing, slightly before sitting at the piano. The theater fell silent as she began to play. This time, her set included a mix of classical masterpieces and original compositions, each piece flowing seamlessly into the next. As her fingers danced across the keys, the audience hung on every note. By the end of her performance, the room erupted into applause, louder and more enthusiastic than ever before. Afterward, guests crowded around her, eager to meet the musician who had captivated them. Many praised her technical skill, but what struck them most was the emotional depth of her playing. Your music tells a story, one woman said, tears glistening in her eyes. It touched my soul. For Emma, these moments of connection meant everything. She hadn't just performed for an audience, she had shared a piece of herself with them, and in return, they had embraced her fully, validating her decision to pursue this path. As the months passed, Emma continued to balance her studies with performances and opportunities that came her way. She released her first single online, a hauntingly beautiful composition titled Echoes of Home. To her surprise, it gained traction quickly, earning praise from critics and listeners alike. Encouraged by the response, she began working on an album, collaborating with other artists and experimenting with new sounds. Through it all, Emma stayed true to her roots. On weekends, she returned to the cafe where it all began, sometimes playing softly for customers who recognized her from the news. She enjoyed these quiet moments, reminding herself of how far she'd come while staying connected to the simplicity of her past. One rainy afternoon, as she sat at the familiar old piano in the cafe, John stopped by unexpectedly. He smiled when he saw her, taking a seat nearby. Still practicing? He asked lightly. Always, Emma replied, glancing up briefly before returning her focus to the keys. There's always more to learn. John nodded thoughtfully. You've done incredible things, Emma. I hope you realize that. She paused, mid-note, looking at him sincerely. I couldn't have done any of it without your help, or Margaret's or Richard's or everyone else who believed in me. Thank you. He waved off her gratitude modestly. All we did was give you a chance. You're the one who made the most of it. They sat together in comfortable silence as raindrops tapped against the windows. For Emma, it was a moment of reflection, a reminder of how much had changed since that fateful night when John had walked into the cafe and listened to her play. She knew challenges lay ahead, but she also knew she was ready to face them. Whatever happened next, she vowed to keep playing, not just for others, but for herself. Because in the end, it was the music that had saved her, and it would always be a part of who she was. Months turned into a year, and Emma's life continued to transform in ways she could never have predicted. Her debut album, Echoes of Home, was released to critical acclaim. Critics praised its emotional depth and authenticity, calling it a masterpiece that speaks directly to the soul. Listeners connected with her music on a personal level, sharing stories of how her songs had helped them through difficult times. It wasn't just an album. It became a soundtrack for people navigating their own journeys. Emma's success brought new opportunities, but it also came with challenges. Suddenly, she was thrust into the spotlight, expected to maintain a perfect image while juggling performances, interviews, and recording sessions. At first, the pressure overwhelmed her. She worried about saying or doing the wrong thing, about disappointing those who believed in her. But over time, she learned to navigate this new world by staying true to herself. She reminded herself why she started playing music in the first place, not for fame or recognition, but because it brought her joy and allowed her to express what words couldn't. One day, as Emma sat in her small apartment reviewing notes for her next project, Lisa called with exciting news. "You're not going to believe this," Lisa said, barely able to contain her excitement. "They want you to perform at Carnegie Hall." Emma froze, the phone slipping slightly in her hand. "What? Are you serious?" "Dead serious," Lisa replied. "It's part of a special program showcasing emerging artists. Everyone's talking. About you, Em. You've earned this. Carnegie Hall." The name alone carried weight, a symbol of excellence and achievement for musicians around the world. Emma had always admired performers who graced its stage, never imagining she would join their ranks. For days after hearing the news, she alternated between excitement and panic. How could she possibly live up to such an honor? Richard Dawson, ever the steady presence in her life, offered reassurance during one of their practice sessions. "You don't need to reinvent yourself for Carnegie Hall," he told her. "Just be who you are. That's what got you here." With Richard's guidance, Emma prepared meticulously for the performance. She chose pieces that represented different stages of her journey, classical works that challenged her technically, original compositions that reflected her emotions, and even a lighthearted encore piece to leave the audience smiling. Every note was infused with purpose, every melody crafted with care. The night of the performance arrived, and Emma felt a mix of nerves and anticipation as she stepped backstage at Carnegie Hall. The theater was breathtaking, its grand architecture and rich history adding to the significance of the moment. As she waited for her turn, she looked out at the sea of faces filling the seats. Among them were familiar ones: Lisa, John, Margaret, and Richard, all smiling proudly from the audience. When Emma finally walked onto the stage, the applause was thunderous. She bowed deeply before sitting at the gleaming Steinway piano, taking a moment to center herself. Then, with a deep breath, she began to play. From the first note, the room fell silent. Emma poured her heart into each piece, allowing the music to speak for itself. Her fingers moved effortlessly across the keys, weaving together melodies that ranged from hauntingly beautiful to uplifting and joyful. By the time she reached the final composition, an original piece inspired by her late grandmother, the audience was visibly moved. Some wiped away tears while others leaned forward, captivated by the raw emotion emanating from the stage. When the last chord faded into silence, there was a brief pause before the crowd erupted into applause. People stood cheering wildly as Emma rose from the bench, bowing repeatedly. Flowers were thrown onto the stage and shouts of "Bravo" echoed through the hall. It was a moment she would remember forever, a culmination of years of hard work, sacrifice, and belief in herself. After the performance, Emma mingled with guests at a reception held in her honor. Strangers approached her, eager to share how her music had touched their lives. One elderly woman grasped her hands tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Your grandmother must be so proud of you," she said softly. "I lost mine recently, and your song. It felt like she was speaking to me." Emma blinked back tears, nodding gratefully. Moments like these reminded her why she played: to connect, to heal, to remind people they weren't alone. As the evening wound down, Emma found John standing near the edge of the room, sipping champagne quietly. He smiled when he saw her approaching. "Well?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "How does it feel to conquer Carnegie Hall?" Emma laughed softly, shaking her head in disbelief. "Honestly, I'm still trying to process it. I never thought I'd get here." "You deserve it," John replied firmly. "Every bit of it." His words warmed her heart. Over the past year, John had become more than just a mentor. He was a friend, someone who understood her struggles and celebrated her victories. She owed much of her success to his unwavering support. In the weeks following the Carnegie Hall performance, Emma's career soared to new heights. Offers flooded in, from international tours to collaborations with renowned artists. Yet amidst the whirlwind of activity, she remained grounded. She continued working part-time at the cafe, when her schedule allowed, cherishing the simplicity it brought to her otherwise hectic life. Customers loved seeing her behind the counter, serving coffee and chatting casually about her latest projects. One chilly morning, as Emma cleared tables during a quiet shift, she noticed a young girl sitting alone near the window. The girl looked shy, clutching a sketchpad close to her chest. Something about her demeanor reminded Emma of herself at that age, unsure, yet brimming with untapped potential. Curious, Emma approached her. "Hey there," she said gently. "Can I bring you anything?" The girl glanced up, startled. "Oh, no thank you, I'm okay," Emma smiled. "Mind if I sit for a minute? This is my favorite spot in the cafe." The girl hesitated but nodded, scooting over slightly to make room. As they talked, Emma learned that the girl loved drawing but rarely showed her work to anyone. "I'm not good enough," she admitted quietly. Emma tilted her head, studying her thoughtfully. "You know, I used to think the same thing about my music. I spent years hiding it because I didn't think it mattered. But then someone encouraged me to share it, and look where I am now." The girl frowned, skeptical. "That's different. You're amazing." "So are you," Emma countered. "But you'll never know unless you try. Sometimes all it takes is one person to believe in you." The girl considered this, her grip loosening slightly on the sketchpad. Though Emma didn't push further, she hoped her words might plant a seed of confidence in the young artist. Later that evening, as Emma closed up the cafe, she paused near the old piano. Running her fingers lightly over the keys, she reflected on how far she'd come. From playing quietly in an empty room to performing on some of the world's most prestigious stages, her journey had been anything but ordinary. And yet, at its core, it remained simple. She played because she loved it, because it gave her purpose. As she locked the door behind her and stepped out into the cool night air, Emma felt a deep sense of gratitude for the people who had supported her, for the opportunities that had come her way, and for the music that had guided her through it all. Whatever lay ahead, she knew she would face it with courage and determination. After all, she had already proven that dreams could become reality, if only you dared to take the first step. A year after her performance at Carnegie Hall, Emma's life had settled into a rhythm that balanced both her newfound fame and the quiet simplicity she cherished. Her album continued to climb charts, earning her nominations for prestigious awards. Critics hailed her as a rising star in the classical music world, while fans praised her ability to blend technical skill with raw emotion. Yet despite the accolades, Emma remained grounded. She refused to let success change who she was, or distance her from the people and places that mattered most. One crisp autumn morning, Emma returned to the cafe where it all began. The familiar scent of coffee beans greeted her as she stepped inside, the soft hum of conversation filling the air. Customers glanced up briefly, recognizing her face from magazine covers and television interviews, but they quickly went back to their drinks and conversations. To them, she wasn't just a celebrated musician. She was still Emma, the waitress who sometimes played piano in the corner. She tied on her apron and got to work, clearing tables and refilling cups with practiced ease. It felt good to be back, to move through the routine motions that had once defined her days. Between shifts, she sat down at the old piano, letting her fingers drift over the keys. The melody she played was gentle, almost like a lullaby, carrying echoes of memories past. As she played, she noticed the young girl from weeks earlier sitting nearby, sketchpad open on the table. The girl looked up shyly when Emma finished. "That was beautiful," she said softly. "Thank you," Emma replied with a warm smile. "I saw some of your drawings last time we talked. They're really good." The girl blushed, lowering her gaze. "I've been practicing more since then. I thought maybe I could show them to someone someday." Emma nodded encouragingly. Someday can start today. You never know who might see your work and believe in you. Later that afternoon, as the cafe emptied out, Emma found herself reflecting on how much her life had changed and how much it hadn't. The cafe was still the same modest establishment it had always been, untouched by the glamour of her career. And yet it held a special place in her heart, a reminder of where her journey began. As evening fell, John stopped by unexpectedly. He settled into his usual spot near the window, ordering a cup of black coffee. When Emma brought it over, he gestured for her to sit across from him. "How are you holding up?" he asked, studying her thoughtfully. "I'm doing okay," she admitted, sipping her own drink. "It's been a crazy year, but I think I'm finally getting used to everything." "That's good to hear," John said with a smile. "You've handled all of this remarkably well. Most people would have crumbled under the pressure." Emma shrugged modestly. "I guess I've learned to take things one day at a time. Plus, having people like you around has made a big difference." John chuckled lightly. "All I did was give you a nudge. The rest was all you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the streetlights flicker on outside. Finally, John leaned forward slightly, his expression serious. "There's something I want to ask you. Have you ever thought about giving back? About helping others find their voice the way so many helped you?" Emma tilted her head, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "I've been working on setting up a foundation," John explained. "It'll provide resources and mentorship for aspiring artists, musicians, painters, writers, anyone with a dream but no means to pursue it. I'd love for you to be part of it. Your story is proof that talent doesn't need privilege to shine." Emma felt a lump rise in her throat. She had often wondered how she could use her platform to make a difference, and now, here was an opportunity staring her in the face. "Of course," she said without hesitation. "I'd be honored." Over the next few months, Emma threw herself into the project. Alongside John and Margaret Lane, she helped design programs aimed at supporting young artists from underserved communities. Workshops were organized, scholarships established, and partnerships formed with schools and community centers. Emma took particular joy in mentoring a group of teenage musicians, sharing tips and encouragement during weekly sessions. One evening, as she packed up her sheet music after a workshop, a boy lingered behind hesitantly. He was barely 13, with shaggy hair and a nervous grin. "Miss Carter?" he ventured timidly. "Do you think I could ever play like you?" Emma knelt down to meet his eye level, smiling warmly. "Absolutely. But remember, it's not about playing like me or anyone else. It's about finding your own sound, your own story. Just keep practicing and don't give up." The boy nodded earnestly, clutching his battered guitar case tighter. "Okay. Thanks, Miss Carter." Moments like these reminded Emma why she had chosen to stay involved. Seeing the spark of hope in someone else's eyes reignited her own passion for music and reinforced her belief in the power of art to transform lives. By spring, the foundation had gained momentum, drawing attention from media outlets and philanthropists alike. Emma became its unofficial ambassador, speaking at events and advocating for greater access to arts education. She also released her second album, titled New Beginnings, which featured collaborations with several emerging artists supported by the foundation. The album was met with widespread acclaim, further cementing her status as a trailblazer in the industry. Despite her growing responsibilities, Emma made time for the little things that kept her grounded. She continued playing at the cafe whenever she could, delighting regular customers with impromptu performances. On weekends, she visited her mother, baking cookies together and reminiscing about old times. These moments of normalcy anchored her, reminding her that success didn't have to come at the cost of authenticity. One rainy Sunday afternoon, as Emma sat at the cafe piano, Lisa joined her with 2 steaming mugs of tea. "So," Lisa teased, settling onto the bench beside her. "Any plans to conquer the world next week?" Emma laughed, shaking her head. "Not unless you count planning my grocery list." Lisa grinned, nudging her shoulder playfully. "Seriously though, Em, look at everything you've done. You've inspired so many people, including me." Emma paused, considering her words. "I guess I've just tried to stay true to myself. If I can help even one person feel less alone, then it's all worth it." As the rain pattered against the windows, Emma resumed playing, weaving a melody that seemed to capture the essence of her journey. It was hopeful, yet reflective, joyful, yet tinged with nostalgia. Outside, the city bustled with activity, oblivious to the quiet magic happening within the cafe walls. For Emma, life wasn't about chasing perfection or seeking validation. It was about connection. Whether through her music, her mentorship, or simply sharing a laugh with a friend, she had found purpose in making others feel seen and valued. And as long as she stayed true to that, she knew she would continue to thrive, not just as a musician, but as a human being. When the final notes faded into silence, Emma closed the lid of the piano gently. She glanced around the cozy room, taking in the familiar sights and sounds. This place, humble as it was, had given her wings to fly. And though her journey had taken her far beyond its walls, a piece of her heart would always remain right here, in the warmth of the cafe, among the people who had believed in her before the world did.